private military vehicle owner, it's quite nice having a little bit of space and opportunity to try out your vehicle, because many sadly have only probably got their brake lights, headlights, indicator lights, so they are road legal, but not everything is allowed on the UK road. But this nice big surface here at Market Harborough gives an opportunity for people to have a proper drive once in a while. Drive and what they can do with it. Commonality of parts, if anything goes wrong, same fuel type. This was a petrol engine at the time. Later on in the 80s, the British Army went to one fuel policy and everything had to be utilised, so we swapped over hazard, and also from the point of view tends to go a bit further on the same fuel quantity. So the whole argument's in a family. If you go and put petrol in the diesel or diesel in the petrol engine, you imagine what that's like on the battlefield in the dark with a jerry can and the wrong fuel. So your senior figure is not going to be happy with the current British Army vehicles. Now the more modern vehicles, joined by an earlier one there, the one racing past, that's the Second World War Daimler Dingo. Built by Daimler. There was a little competition before the war, 3 different entrants, 20s. We were trying an Austin 7 out on Salisbury Plain to see if it could run around the place. The commission went in 39, they started building these, and the Dingo turned out to be an absolute star. There is a fascination in Britain with German armour in the Second World War, and it tends to make us overlook our own successes. And with the Dingo, if it was ever captured, the Germans used it, the Italians gave it the ultimate accolade, they copied it. Is what gear you're in, because if you go from first to fifth, you tend to smash your teeth out on the front armour. Sometimes fitted with a Bren gun, it would carry a 19 set behind the driver and commander, and the real role of the Dingo would go out and find information about the enemy, and that's why you Which means you can remove the track or change the wheel easier.
back later.
Those moving on at the moment are scimitar variants. They've got a 30mm Radon cannon on the top rather than the original Scorpion, but one of those Scorpions that's going out, that has a 76mm gun. And as I mentioned, you might recognise it if you were lucky enough to have the actual Scorpion cannon. That's the one that's going out. Third vehicle, the CBRT, Scimitar 2 variant, other scimitars you'll see going around. And so this is a vehicle that's going to have another history, another battle history, but out with the Ukrainians. The thinner gun, the thicker gun that's going past the road, what engine would be powerful enough to put this vehicle around at a suitable sort of speed. So they ended up by being able to pick up on the Jaguar engine ended up going in there. Some engine that basically integrated the driver nice and neatly. Later, the saving service, they ended up having a perfect. Most of those you'll see running around here actually. See that at the speed it's flipping around at. Half the argument is the faster you were, the less chance up at BAE they were trying to settle one to hit some world record not that long ago. Sold on straight away in the early 70s, Belgian born, went down to Paris as well, and you can find the lots of improvement packages over time, with a bucket on the back. Two-man crew in the top there, it can drive both ways. It's got controls so it can back. It's got water jets. Was replacing pretty fast the same track system that they used on the M113, the armoured personnel carrier you see in all the Vietnam War movies. They did a load carrying version, and it was really like a tracked truck to keep supplies up with the troops or track vehicles in advance. Looks like a tank, but it's really a self-propelled gun, 105mm gun. It's the same as the towed artillery we had in service back in the 60s. Put in the turret and on top of the tank. And the Abbott was basically a cheap way of making self-propelled artillery after the Sextons and priests that had been in service in World War II. Rounds a minute, and then again you need to move on with mobile artillery. Nowadays radar is up so once you fire your rounds you lose before the back to the fire. Just like the CBRT series, if you've got the same engine, same transmission, track, components, drivers will find it easy to learn how to drive, and of course all your spare parts are the same, so you don't need thousands and thousands of different spare parts. And the M578 has basically got a crane cab recovery vehicle and can help replace engines and can rotate the whole way round. Rather low looking, it's an armoured personnel carrier going past the front of the motor. That's an Austrian vehicle. Germany and Austria both ended up building some fairly low slung armoured personnel carriers. 8-man in the back of that, quite sizable. The Austrian version is called the and they only went out of service. You don't tend to fight from the vehicle, they drop you off. Now the rather jazzy urban camo on that Stormer, it's got an experimental turret on the top that was being offered to other countries for sale. Didn't quite work that way, so the vehicles hang around in factory yards and separately use. That's one of the experimental turrets on the top there. displaces enough water that it can float, but you'll see on the front there's sort of jet type arrangements, little grills, and it can angle those and shoot water to steer it as it's going through the water, as well as its tracks going around. It'll propel it along a bit. It won't go on the open sea, but it'll be fine for crossing a river or a lake. One of the CBRTs coming past now, it's got bar armour on, those cages. Those cages are to try and trap rocket-propelled grenades if they're fired at it. And on the turret at the back there's something called the bird table. That's where they put the electronic countermeasures. Again, something picked up Iran and Afghanistan. Got my roadside board. The signal that's going to those roadside bolts. So that bird table and sometimes little boxes on the front fenders, those indicate the electronic countermeasures. The other thing you can see on one or two of the scimitars, little hooks going vertically up the front of the turret, and they're to capture any wires that might have, or telephone lines, or wires that have been put across a road, perhaps deliberately. You can imagine taking off the head of your commander or your driver, or the load is not going to be fun, so simple little measures sometimes wheeled vehicles, as I mentioned, can't always get to the same places tracks can get to. So if you have tanks or light vehicles like the Scorpion's advanced, they're going to need supplies. So you've got to stop. So 548 pallets of fuel or ammunition forward. The same dangerous track radio in the British. Again, the F-113, lots of other countries around the world, made by the combat with lots of different pressurised hoses there on the hydraulic systems for the buckets and various features on it. It was a very complex vehicle, CET, and it's in private ownership. There's quite a number owned privately, but to keep all those different features working takes an awful lot of effort. And as you can imagine, over time hoses perish, seals perish, so keeping one actually fully working is quite something. We mentioned it earlier today, but as you're looking at those track vehicles, the engines are only powering the wheels you think of. Sometimes at the front, sometimes at the back. The wheel of the track, the whole idea of the track, of course, is to spread the weight of a heavy vehicle so it doesn't sink in the ground. Wheel at the back, without on the CBRT, without the sprockets on, that's the idler wheel. So it's just keeping that track nice and short so it doesn't drop off. So the whole idea of the track, of course, is it goes round, picks up behind it, throws forward again to drive over. service from about 1967. It got to the army and to the mid 1990s. It went through lots of upgrades, like all tanks do. So it's got lots of different mark numbers. It tends to be you were given a new mark once you'd had a major improvement. What we're seeing today is mainly Mark 10s and Mark 11s, late ones, because obviously most of the fleet got upgraded during its service life. System working on that 101 tank there. Driving past, it was basically an idea because of Marconi. They put together a radar system, and you can see there on the back of the vehicle there's actually what would spin around a radar to pick up enemy. A couple of early mistakes on the side of it. When it goes through a downer slope or upper mount, so it doesn't bury itself in the earth. You want to charge if you've got mud in the end of your barrel, because it means you won't be able to fire the gun. one of the airburst rounds will penetrate whatever it is that's coming towards you. Still in service with Finland, but they were the only country that bought it in the end. Other countries bought the Gepard version. Evidently cheating going on. Now one thing you can see there, that Centurion ARV couldn't keep up, and that's why you have to have a fleet of vehicles that match your main battle tank. It's the equivalent of about 15 inches thick if you were trying to fire your round at it from the front. But very well angled armour as well, and that helps. You angle the armour, you might get a deflection, but more importantly, you're thickening the level of armour that's got to be penetrated by it. Most of these vehicles have got their position plate on that. The idea there is to try and get follow away from movement suspension that's underneath. Like all vehicles, lots of boxes, baggage areas on the outside. Space inside the tank is like a premium. You have to pass through one of these. A good gun, 105 kilos gun, and what they put all that together, they worked first of all with the French, they fell out, as so often one does with the French, racing around past us now. You out. Now the Gepard, that's on a Leopard hull. Again, got those 35mm cannons on the side there. Version built for the German military. The Dutch ordered them at the same time. They had and again, we'll see that demonstrated in a while. Next tank on from that Cold War period, the M60 American tank. Yeah, the M60, this is an ex-Greek Army M60 there, and because America keeps a long kind of tricycle, a long single control on so it can't turn it on, etc. The State Department's great hole cut in the front, and also another area cut in the turret. Cast armour, last generation, really of the pattern tank in that 47 by America after World War II. Comes into service in 1960. That same British L7, Turkey's got quite a number of these around the world. The American Marines were last used, and they used them in the Gulf War. American Army tends to hand on its kit to the US Marine Corps. Went through a number of models. A lot of countries, when they finished using their Centurion tanks, they ended up buying the Leopard tank instead for their next generation of tanks that went into service. And all this generation made in huge quantities, probably the most made tank of all time. They reckon coming on for 100,000 of these in different variations. T-54, 100mm gun, diesel engine in the back, very simple again, made in large quantities, that classic frying pan shaped turret, good ballistic protection with the thickness of armour, followed by a later Soviet tank, the T-72. Now if you look carefully, the T-72's got a lower profile. One of the crew members of the turret. The person that needs the most space in the tank turret is the loader. He's got to pick up the big cell, first of all with the T-64 tank. Said, right, let's get rid of the loader and put an auto loader instead. The big cell goes out under that turret. The power cell rounds that expands this process. And that's why we've been seeing sometimes when T-72 tanks have been hit, their turrets blow off because there's a secondary fire of all the ammunition going up. T-72 still out there in huge quantities, just like the T-54. Russia gave China the plan back in 1959 when there was a Sino-Soviet 54. That's called the Type 59. Type tanks are Chinese copies of Russian tanks, basically. The T-72, that low speed profile it's got, it's a 400 meter on the head exhaust, that's what makes that smoke screen. And the idea is it's got a nice big smoke screen to hide behind it. Nowadays, some smoke screens are really clever, they can hide with the infrared, thermal screen. Also, the field of tanks are big targets, especially in this day of drones, so it kind of needs all the help it can get to hide itself from the enemy on the tanks like the T-54 being used by the Russian military in Ukraine. It's got a 100mm gun on and it works, you know, no one really cares what type of tank kills you, it's still got a viability. That's what the Soviets do, they would not replace you. British Embassy compound in the Hungarian uprising, and the defence attaché had a moment to measure the thickness of the armour, and that led Britain to realise we're going to need a bigger gun on our tanks than the 20-pounder on the Centurion. So they started a programme at Fort Halstead in Kent to come up with a new tank gun, and the 105mm L7, the Swiss bought it, the Americans built it under license. It's still the gun that went on the first Abrams, and again it could fire a range of ammunition, slugs of tungsten in pots, it could fire smoke shells, it could fire canister rounds, lots of pellets if you're firing against liquid sail transport back in the day. We moved on to the 120mm rifle. Most countries now have ready under their starting order. So Leopard T-72 and M60, I think, that order of how they came out there. Leopards, with that extra power they had with that MTU diesel, very, very effective. And as I mentioned, with Leopard 2s, the Germans very successful adding armour, but keeping the mobility up, keeping that speed and mobility. And there's that T-72 making smoke. Brakes on. You can overheat your brakes or just simply burn them out, and that's why tanks, when they go around corners, they often go around like the edge of a 50p piece. Straight line, change the angle, straight line, change the angle. That saves the brakes a bit.
You're flying down.
for a moment. Now this is a combination, probably never actually seen. Always open, by the way.
Incidentally, the replicator got that.
So the third vehicle that's coming on, this is a phone drops vehicle. And drops basically explode and pick up another load. So if you can imagine you're putting fuel supplies forward, pallets of ammunition, whatever it happens to be, or a vehicle like this full wheelbase Land Rover. The idea behind it, you can fairly quickly, instead of having to have forklifts, etc., the hook on the back basically rises up, layers down the vehicle drives forward, the whole truck drives forward, and then you've got basically the whole of that flatbed is left behind. You can pick up another one. They called it the drop system, and it was still in use. It's a very successful way of very quickly offloading heavy loads and picking up new loads. Guns were originally fitted to aircraft, but when they were retired, the military got hold of some of them. So again, it just gives you an awful lot of firepower on a relatively small vehicle. Their military service, which is why we're fortunate enough to see so many of them still around. Some in their post-war liveries like Recovery, etc. There it is. Look at that scamel showing off that articulation of the wheels there, which is quite something. The other truck racing around, that's the American post-war, the REO. Basically they had a last generation of pretty sophisticated diesel engine in that. And again, from the point of view of the American military, passed on to Allied nations, etc. So there's an awful lot of those. See them in a lot of Vietnam War movies, etc. Has a very distinctive whistle that drives around. Of deciding what's going to replace the last of the Land Rovers, Wolves, that are in British Army service as they're called at the moment. It's just like a normal soft-skip vehicle on daily use, but if it's going to be deployed, that's when you either add some extra armour around the cab or the rest of the body. So many vehicles these days are modular. You have a universal fixing point, you can take different things on the back of the vehicle, so the equivalent of like the Thunderbird going on. So some of the Fodens and some of the recovery vehicles, that one with gone on into civilian use, Maiden variant. Then you can't see to recover lighter weight vehicles with a winch, or the crane as well can help recover overturned vehicles. Good condition. Softing, in other words, it's not armour plated, whatever it is, and that means you have to adapt and change, add armour, add more firepower, or find new ways of using that bit of equipment. Which is simply why some of these vehicles here, even though they look pretty old, they've still got roles to play. Armoured vehicles like the Ferret driving around there. Driving past, still in British Army colours. Obviously, because of the military nature, they've been well maintained, they're looked after, they're serviced regularly, so if you're looking at one of these vehicles, you've probably got a good idea of service life and some of the mileage, of course, because some vehicles sometimes are war reserves, some of them are only taken out and used at certain events at certain times and will be fired out in front of the vehicle. Nice big smoke screen builds up, and that hides you from the enemy as you retreat away out of trouble. You can see those where the driver is. He's got his little hatches open, so you can see when you come under fire, hatches are closed down, and the commander sits down inside the vehicle by the armour. Lightweight Land Rover, again, cut down version to make it was designed so it could follow an Abrams or other heavier vehicles up ahead, the idea being it can follow in the same path, knowing that's free of mines, etc. And the Humvee, whole aim behind it, think of it almost like a Land Rover, slightly larger, but again, it could be up-armoured, huge variations in its service life, and again being sold on or passed on around the world, so quite a few armies sport the Humvee as well. Pinscour going past, this lighter vehicle, used again by the British Army. Parachute Regiment had some of these, not with the box body on the back there, and you can have open top versions, but again very effective cross-country pin scours. And there we've got long wheelbase Land Rovers. The ones in service at the moment got higher box bodies on the back so that the nurse or doctor in the rear can stand on the stretchers in the rear. Mentioning earlier, most of these vehicles, they're four-wheel drive, so you'll see the abbreviation 4x4, that means all four wheels are powered by the engine. Or if it's a 6x6, it means all six wheels are powered by the engine. Many of the vehicles, because that uses so much more fuel, many of the vehicles have levers inside or different, and that's much more economic to drive on the road. So you'll see some of them, they put it in four-wheel drive going through the cross-country bits, and back to two-wheel drive if they're going to be driving home this evening. Again, another one of these long wheelbase Land Rovers being done up as its potentially an SS. And we've got now, there we go, 105 gun is that? No, it's an even bigger one there going past now. Service, but most has been got rid of, those being too vulnerable. So most artillery these days have ended up being in on various self-propelled artillery pieces. So in other words, you've got an armoured body around it, and normally tracks as well around the vehicle that's carrying it. Although we're now moving into a period of quite big artillery that's actually now on wheel chassis as well. 90s, well not all of them, only a few of them actually have gone to Ukraine. We've given away most of our S90 fleet. So we're looking at new systems to put into service. Nearly there, not quite.
Alright. Yeah, we can shoot. Yeah.
Need their own support vehicles, so all the kit we're seeing today, other vehicles for supply, replenishment, for air cover, etc. These are all vehicles that would work as part of a team, not individually on their own, as we tend to see them as one-offs. And that means a lot more logistics. In other words, all those other things that keep soldiers in the field, keep them going, food, water. All these vehicles are going to need fuel, which is why the Royal Logistics Corps is pretty much the biggest corps in the army these days. Again, the lightweight Land Rovers with a shorter wheelbase, they're able to cope with that slope. So last couple of laps for those vehicles, and then we're going to... this with the Yugoslav army post-war, supplied by the Americans, and it's got a much more modern T-54 engine. They put it like Chieftain starting to enter the arena. First one's the Mark III without all the added armour that was added to them later in service life. Painted a Mark X in the colours of Bactus. Used to go out to Canada to train, about a huge training area that moments in abeyance. Berlin camouflage Chieftain, urban camouflage, all that blotter's pack on it to hide it against buildings. Another Chieftain, the next one's the one with the Chinese eyes on the side of the turret, eyes so the tank can see where it's going. Part of the Royal Tank Regiment, a huge one that is managed to somehow suit up and get an extra bit of speed out of. Chieftain Armoured Recovery Vehicle. You've seen that in the arena today, but that's the one with the dozer blade and the crane on it. When it goes by again, you'll see that lovely hole in the front. Chieftain, hull and marksman turret on the top there. Soviet era T-55 tank. Followed it by the Centurion ARV, that's the one that was dug out the hole by the dozer. And then we got the Leopard tank following up on the rear there. Right at the back, coming on the arena, the Gepard, the German Leopard tank with the anti-aircraft system on the top. So as they start parking the vehicles up, just to let you know, that World War II tank park, that's open now, so if you want to work your way around there, you can get really close to the vehicles as they're coming in, and that'll be open, and from that position is where we'll open the fence line, so you can get in and get up close to the vehicles once they're all there and parked up. It'll take a couple of minutes, because they're bringing them in one at a time, obviously, and well, there'll be quite a selection there. And as I mentioned earlier in the day, if you are going in to have a closer look, just watch those hot exhausts. They'll still be quite warm from the running around they've been doing. So that's on the right hand side of the arena if you want to go and have a closer look at them. They can all hear you. Give them a round of applause. They put a lot of effort into getting those vehicles here today, working all sorts of hours to get them going for your entertainment delight. And I hope you have enjoyed the show today. Thank you very much for coming along, supporting Operation Market Harborough. And